Good morning, everyone. My name is Juan Vasquez. I am going to be your presenter, trainer for this next hour and a half, where we're going to get into some web scraping. I'll be telling you all a little bit about myself and most definitely what the next 90 or so minutes look like. But I just want to thank you all for being here, for coming to my session, for choosing to invest in your learning and being here on a Tuesday. General show of hands, who's feeling good about the conference so far? Who has learned a good amount of things, good exposure? Excellent, that's good to hear. And so we're going to be talking about web scraping using two strategies. We're going to be looking at how to scrape with BeautifulSoup and also how to scrape Yelp listings using their Yelp API. A little bit about me before we get too deep into the data part of things. Again, Juan Vasquez. By day, I am the data programs manager at the city's Office of Finance. I am part of one of 43 departments that make up our local city infrastructure as far as local government goes. And we're really our city's primary revenue collector and generator. So every year we collect about $4.5 billion that then feed into our general fund. That impacts things like public safety, a lot of the fires and LAFD efforts that we really desperately need. And then just the general functions of the city. Those roughly $4.5 billion come in the form of city business tax, permits, and then collections. So for example, if someone gets in a car accident, maybe they had a DUI, they impact some public property, that goes to the city attorney, and then eventually it has to be collected on. That's also something my department handles. So it's a lot of business functions. We have about 400 employees, 12 divisions. So it's a big organization. It's one of the larger departments the city has. I am there largely to help bring a data lens and a data perspective to different types of business problems. So I typically cycle through projects. I help different business units implement data practices and data management standards if they don't have any. If they already have some sort of data management infrastructure, I help make it better. I help standardize, automate, optimize processes, try to cut down reporting time. Tell stories through our data using dashboards and interactive maps. That's a lot of what I do day to day. I also teach data analytics weekends and nights at General Assembly, typically a 6-week online course on advanced Excel, SQL, and Tableau. And I also do freelance kind of data services. My wife and I recently got married this year. We bought a home in Boyle Heights, thank you. We're big LAFC fans, for anyone that's into soccer here in the room. And so that's a little bit about me. Also, just kind of a moment of empathy and being real with you all. This is my first time speaking and teaching on Python. So this year, I took it upon myself to learn the language. I was done with tools. I'm a former advertiser, so that's what I went to school for. That's what I did at the beginning of my career. And over these last 10 years, as a working professional, I've realized the power and importance of programming languages. And so I can do a lot of things with tools, but the reality is there's a very real roof as far as how high my career can go and my salary can go and my professional opportunities can go without a command of a programming language. Python was my language of choice. And so what you're going to see here is really the result of the last 11 months or so of work. Meaning my general level of comfort. So I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm a strategic communicator who has turned into a data analyst. I'm exploring data science and really love it and want to be better at it. But what you're going to see here is in no way perfect. Definitely a lot of room to improve and optimize my code and all of that. So just in case anyone here is from maybe a non-traditional career background, just know I empathize and also a little bit of expectation setting. All right, I just want to be very real with you all as far as where I'm at in my data journey. Okay, we're going to do 2 tutorials and then we should have some room for Q&A at the end, perhaps 10, 15 minutes. And so this is what we're going to, also I tweet and Instagram a good bit about these things. So anyone trying to use social media to consume more of this content, there's my handle and also my website. So this is what we're getting into for the next hour and a half or so. We're just going to quickly talk about why scrape data, why is that helpful, how can it support business functions and operations. Then we're going to do a brief overview of what the tutorials will be. So broad strokes, we're going to think about how these concepts fit together so that you go from information on a website to manageable, useful data and some sort of vehicle that you can bring into your work or do analysis on. Then after that overview, we're gonna do a bit of strategy around Yellow Pages, which will be our first use case. And then we'll go scrape some Yellow Pages. And then we'll reset, we'll do a little bit of strategy around Yelp, and then we'll go scrape some Yelp data. And then at the end, we'll have some Q&A, and we'll kind of see how this goes. So kicking things off, why scrape in the first place? Scraping is the practice of accessing data that lives in a third-party site, for example, and bringing it to an environment that you yourself can use. Perhaps a notebook like we'll be using today, CSV files, Excel files, anything that gives you some sort of command or ownership over that data. And so that's how I view web scraping. There are two really good reasons why web scraping can be useful. The first is that you can use it to drive traffic and awareness about the topics you care about. So I'll quickly share one personal example. When I started getting into data, the first thing I ever scraped was 2018 World Cup data and built this Tableau dashboard that you see up here. Let me give it a second to load. And so you can use web scraping external data sources to drive awareness, bring attention, web traffic, have conversations, build narratives, build a portfolio piece, perhaps. And so this was something that was interactive and kind of tracked team performance as the tournament went on, landing on the eventual winner France. At the bottom, we have goals. And so this was all scraped from ESPN using Google Sheets, so some of the import functions, which we're not going to get into today. But this is where my kind of journey scraping data started. And it's definitely been helpful having a portfolio piece. So an example of how you can scrape data to drive attention to a particular website, newsletter content, social media content. If you work for a nonprofit, a foundation, a for-profit business, and you want to drive dialogue and educational efforts, you want to inform users about a topic, you can scrape data and build some sort of web product that then you can promote to and promote against, and again, inform and educate. You can also use scrape data as an intelligence tool. This is largely what we use scrape data for at the Office of Finance. Basically, get smarter about what is happening in and around you and see how it can inform your business functions and operations. So we've been scraping Yellow Pages data and Yelp data to get a sense of what the business landscape looks like in Los Angeles. We have a perspective of that based on our own data collection and people registering with us. But if we analyze Yelp data and Yellow Pages data, which is what we're doing now, then we can really think about what might be we missing and where might be some good areas to target, to center humans. We're walking the fine line between soliciting against this data, and so that there's some legalities as to what you can and can't do. But you can really also enrich your existing data and again, grow intelligence and make better, more informed decisions about your resource allocation and things like that. Also, I know many startups and smaller businesses don't have a lot of data available. And so if you're trying to learn more about human behavior and what your potential customers, where they're at and what they're doing, you can use scrape data and open data to inform kind of your market research and things like that. So a little bit on why scraping is important. Right now at Finance, we are bringing in the scraped Yellow Pages and Yelp data into scorecards that we can use with other external data sources to see in how many listings might a business appear and use that to qualify our leads. Any general thoughts, any questions on what scraping might be or any point of clarification there? Just want to create some space in case anyone has anything. So real quick overview of what we'll be working on and what code we'll be writing out and in fact how we will be scraping. So we're going to use three primary tools or libraries or modules. We're going to use the request library in both of our use cases, and we're going to use BeautifulSoup to scrape Yellow Pages data, and then we will use the Yelp Fusion API to scrape Yelp listings. And so a request helps us handle web calls and actual web requests that grab some sort of HTTP information and package it up in a way that you can use with other libraries. And then BeautifulSoup is a great library to help you handle actual HTML structure and read HTML tags and do analysis, or in this case, scrape data from there. Now, Yelp is very much aware that people want their data and they want to use their data, so they've created their Fusion API, which lets you search their listings and extract at a rate of maximum 50 listings per call, and they have definitely thresholds. And so we actually need everyone to create a Yelp developer account. So show of hands here, who has a Yelp developer account, who plans to follow along? Okay. Show of hands here, who doesn't have a Yelp developer account and plans to follow along? Okay, then let's take, it doesn't take very long. Just take, what, like 3 minutes or so to create a Yelp developer account. And to do that, you'll just need to Google Yelp developer. And in your Google results, you'll have Yelp Fusion there. Something like this will be using the business search API. But click into Yelp Fusion and get to a place where you can get started. So again, Google Yelp developer, then select Fusion, and then click Get Started. You'll be prompted to create an account, and then we'll need to create an application. So go ahead and set up those accounts. For everyone who already has an account, show of hands here, if you have an account, do you also have already an app set up so you have a key to work with? No? Okay, so if you don't have, if you've already created your Yelp developer account, you'll want to click Manage App, and from here you'll need to create one so that you in fact get this type of API, client ID and API key. All right. We're going to be starting with the Yellow Pages, so if you still need to set up the last few things, we'll create space for this as we transition from Yellow Pages to Yelp. A little bit on how you can think about this web scraping use case. And you know, as you all probably know, when it comes to programming and working with languages, there are many ways to get to the same destination. And so this is my approach to this. Again, there are ways to make it more optimal, and you can definitely think of other ways to scrape data. Broad strokes, what we're going to be doing is prepping our notebook, setting up our code, setting up our libraries. Then we're going to be targeting specific pieces of data, either by targeting HTML tags or by targeting objects in the JSON response that the Yelp API will generate for us. So we'll prep our kind of working infrastructure, our layout of data. We'll target the data we want. Then whatever we scrape, we're going to append to existing lists, and then we're going to use those lists to structure a data frame. So this is the process we're going to be taking our data. We're going to prep our tools, the tools we need. We're going to target the data we want. We're going to append that data to empty lists, and then we're going to structure it in a data frame. And then we can get that data frame out or do further analysis. Some more specific tools that we will need to work with: f-strings, for loops, lists, and then the eventual data frame. F-strings, for loops, lists, and data frames. This will largely be a code along, so I am cheating and I have my solutions open in a tab, so if I get stuck, I will be peeking. But these are some of the extra kind of ingredients we'll need to work with along, you know, as we kind of follow these broad steps. All right, now that we have a broad understanding of what we'll be doing, we'll be prepping, targeting, appending, and then structuring, and then using a few additional structures. We're going to be using a notebook. So originally I had planned to use Jupyter Notebooks. If you want to use that, go for it. But I don't know if you all use Google Colab notebooks. It's basically a Google Drive alternative to a notebook. You can access it through this website right here, bit.ly/YP_scrape. Go ahead and head there. I tested it this morning. It should all be working fine. If you must have at the very least a Gmail account. If you don't, you can download the notebook and perhaps open it up in Anaconda. But ideally, if you have a Gmail account, just make a copy of it. We'll view this in a second. Make a copy of it, and we'll work through it together. bit.ly/YP_scrape. It should look like this. Just an empty notebook with a handful of headers that will provide us direction. We're going to use this to scrape our Yellow Pages data, and in a minute, we're going to kind of lay out a strategy on how we're going to be targeting the different HTML objects within the Yellow Pages website. It's right here, bit.ly /YP _ scrape. bit.ly /YP _ scrape. Thumbs up if you got it open. Does anyone need any assistance or help? Okay, sweet, thank you. Again, it should be something like this. If you go to File, you can save a copy in your drive and then go to it. You won't be able to edit this based on our permission settings, so you need to make a copy of it that you can use. This is just like a Google Doc, it's just like Google Slides, any other Google product, just shareable, collaborative notebooks. There are definitely some limitations in how it reads and interprets code, but this has been a pretty sweet product to work with. So go ahead and save a copy, open it up in your drive, and then we're going to head to the Yellow Pages and do some strategy. So here we have the Yellow Pages. The reason I use BeautifulSoup to scrape the Yellow Pages is because their data lives right within the HTML structure of the page. And so it just made itself very scrapable using the BeautifulSoup library. So we're going to inspect the HTML of this page. We're going to identify the specific tags we want. And we're going to think through how to actually target them with our code. Okay, so here we have a listing of businesses. If you just go to yellowpages.com and search, for example, the legal section, you get a long list of businesses. In my exploring of the Yellow Pages, it seemed like they bundled together all of their data into broadly 8 categories, which you can see in the Browse button section here. So typically, all of their businesses, regardless of how granular a description they end up having or how specialized they are, they typically seem to be bucketed into these broad categories that you see here. And so if we just start exploring the data that's available to us, you will see that there are some ads running at the top. What is going on? Oh, sorry, I clicked into an ad. That's what happened. So you'll see that a listing for any section usually starts with an ad at the top, which we're going to exclude from our scrape. When I first started scraping this page, I included the ads, and I realized that the way the information is structured within an ad varies ad to ad and is different from the organic listings, and so it will mess with our eventual structure. So we're not going to scrape any ads. Instead, we're only going to scrape the actual organic listings that appear here. So if you look at any given business here, we see that we have a name. We'll want that. We have a description here. We have a phone number right here, 310. We have an address. And so we're going to scrape all of those objects out of HTML as tags and add the text portion of that to a list. And so let's explore now the HTML. Let's see how to figure out how to get all the phone numbers and the names and all that stuff. So if you're on a Mac, was there a question?
Yes, I have a question. I just missed it. Are you also planning to scrape the stars, like the votes?
We can. The question was, are we planning on scraping the ratings? Yeah, I wasn't planning on it, but we can see how the data lives and see if we can scrape it. So again, we have broad strokes. We have a listing for a business here. Now, if you're in a Mac with no buttons, do a 2-finger click into your mouse. If you have buttons, it should be your right mouse button. You want to open up this dialog box right here, this little dialog box. Again, 2-finger click or right click. And this will give you the opportunity to inspect the HTML code behind the front-facing website. And so that's what we want. Go ahead and open up the dialog box and then click Inspect. Now on the right side, we see basically the anatomy of the website, all of its bones and muscles and structure. And now we just need to figure out what are the actual tag names that represent the actual pieces of data within the listing. And then we'll feed that into our eventual for loop and just iterate through page and listing, grabbing all of that and appending it to separate lists, and then bringing it all together in one data frame. Let's use our friend, the arrow in the top left corner of your kind of HTML document. For anyone that hasn't, I expect most people have played around with the inspect in some capacity, but if you haven't, that arrow will identify the object on the screen you're clicking into. It will identify it within the HTML structure. So let's quickly use our friend the arrow to identify the tag names that we'll want to scrape. And now it's a game of trying to get as granular as you can. Here you go. So what we find is that the business name is hidden, or not hidden, it lives within our H2 container with a class of N. So we're going to use that H2 header with the class name N to target all of the business names. And so this is the type of exploration we have to do to identify all of our relevant data pieces. And so go ahead and let's find one more, and then I'll just give you all a list of all of the tag names we'll be using, so we use more of our time writing code and not exploring HTML. So we have the business name at H2 class name N. We also want the description beneath it. Let's see if we can zero in on that. That is a div called categories, or with a class name of categories. And so it's going to be a second one. That one. All right, so that's an example of two. You could do this game for every piece of a business listing. But if you want to go ahead and write down on a piece of paper or on a sticky note on your computer, I'm going to give you I think it's 5 different tags we're going to pull. Every one of them would be the same workflow. So we're going to scrape the H2 tag with class N, which we already looked at. We're going to scrape a div with class of phone primary. Again, the name is going to be an H2N class. The phone number is going to be a div with class name phone primary. The address is going to be a div with class name street-address. We have 2 more. The city and zip code, which are not included in the div that I just mentioned, that's going to be a div with a class name of locality. And then the last one is this kind of bucket of more granular descriptions. Those are categories. And so that's going to be a div called categories. All right, so we'll start structuring our code around these key HTML tags. H2, div. Now there's one more thing we have to take into account. You didn't know this up until now. Our organic listings live within one large div that is called info. Actually, let me rephrase that. Each of our organic business listings lives within a div that is called info. And so we're going to be first collecting all of the listing divs and then looping through those, grabbing all the pieces. This is the way we're going to exclude our paid ads. Okay, so that's a little bit of the strategy we're going to do. We've identified the tags that we want to target. Now we'll follow what we laid out kind of as our strategy of prepping our notebook, targeting our HTML, appending it, and then structuring it all together using mostly for loops and empty lists. So go ahead and head over to the notebook that I shared with you all and make sure you're on the working copy, your own working copy. All right, are we all on a working, thumbs up if you're on a working copy of your notebook. Okay, does anyone need a minute getting to their notebook? All right, so we need to first prep our notebook. We need to import the 3 main libraries we'll be using. So again, we'll be using requests, BeautifulSoup, and pandas. So let's import requests as R. Import, the way we take or we import BeautifulSoup is we need to import BS4 from import BeautifulSoup. I have that right. Yeah. Soup. So import request is R from BS4, import BeautifulSoup, and then import pandas as usual as PD. See if that worked. All right. And I'm curious, show of hands, who's using the Colab notebook? Who's using your own Jupyter notebook? Cool, okay. All right, so we have our libraries imported. We have the building blocks for the tools we need. Now, we need to create a list of all of the URLs that a scraper needs to hit to then peel into and grab the HTML objects. So we first need a list of URLs to iterate through and to target our HTML objects. Oh, thank you, dude. Thank you, Nick. This is Nick, everybody. Just say hello to Nick for a second. He's my assistant helping here, so if you need some help. Yeah, Nick. Thank you. Coming in clutch with the water. All right, so I got us started with the URL that we need. And so the way we're going to create our list of URLs is, here, check this out. So if we look at the current URL structure for legal, we need to dissect a little bit of how this data lives. You will see that the URL is the same for every page. The only thing that changes is the number at the end. So everything stays the same for our URL structure. The only thing that changes is the number at the end. And so the way we're going to create our list of URLs is by using this base string and then using an F string to attach a range of 102 numbers, basically covering the entire category of legal and packaging that up into one list that then we can iterate over. And so the way we're going to do that is, we already have our first object up here. We have a string of text that is legal. We now need to create our range of 102 digits to effectively attach at the end of all of our URLs. So you can just call this pages. And this is a range with 102 numbers. Now we also need an empty list to eventually attach all of our specific, more granular URLs. So let's go ahead and create an empty business list. And now let's create our first for loop that grabs this long URL, the string of text, and iterates over it, attaching a specific page number at the end of it, and we're going to use an F string to do this. If you want to take it another route, feel free to go for it, but just feel free to follow along as well. So for page in pages, oh, no, sorry, for page, yeah, in pages, we want to iterate over that last number. We want to create a legal URL that using an F string brings together the long string of text available up in our legal object and adds to it whatever number pages it is currently looping at. So here's a little bit of that code. We're iterating over pages, we're creating a legal URL that is the result of grabbing our base string of text here and attaching each of the numbers available in our range. And then lastly, we have that empty business list that we're going to append the actual legal URL that we've created up above. Let's try it out. Let's see if this works. Why not for page? Oh. I have I where I should have page. There we go. Let me quickly check. All right, so I have, let's take a look at what this looks like. And so you should have a long list of URLs, basically 102 URLs that use our base string here and attaches a number at the end. I'll leave this up for a second. Thumbs up if you're with me. Do we have any questions? Okay, we'll give folks a second to finish this piece. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is nest together two for loops that iterate through our list of URLs, and then for each page, we want to iterate through the listings and grab the key pieces of data we want. But we also need some empty lists to store those pieces of data in and then eventually stitch together into a data frame. So we'll do that. I see some folks still typing, so I just want to give us a second here. All right, so I'm going to reset my kernel and just run it again since I already have my list. Because if we run this for loop again, we're just going to append that same batch into the existing list. So I'm just going to reset my kernel and then we'll run this again. All right, so I'm importing my libraries. And then here we're creating. All right, so now that we have our list of URLs that we want to iterate over, we need, based on my strategy, we need empty list to store each of those HTML objects that then will stitch together into a data frame. And so let's initialize 5 different lists that are empty lists that coincide with the listing data we want. And so we know we're going to have names. Let's do this together. Create a name list that's empty. Create a phone list that's empty. Create an address list. Locality list. That's where our city and zip are going to live. And a categories list, all empty. Cool. So now we have empty containers that we can store our data in as we loop through our pages and our individual listings. Now, let's start our 2 for loops that together, the outer for loop is going to iterate through the pages, and the inner for loop is going to target the key tags that we outlined before. So here we're going to be iterating really over the business list. So we want for every page in our business list, for every page in our business list, we want to use requests to get that page. And then we're going to create an HTML doc that turns that request into text. And then from that HTML document, we're going to create our soup. And that's where all of our HTML tags are going to live in a way that we can specifically target them. So we have our soup object. We'll call BeautifulSoup. Soup. And we'll pass in that HTML doc that we created above. So this is the top part of really, that's our outer loop initially here. We're iterating through each page that we created in the business list. We're turning that call into text. That text is then passed into BeautifulSoup. Now, I mentioned that all of our organic listings, excluding our ads, live in containers that are called info. And so we're going to create one more soup that has only our organic listings. And so I call these organic listings. And here we're going to call our soup object above. And we're going to find all the divs that are class name info. And that concludes our outer loop. So now we have the runway to iterate through every page, and now we need to decide what we want to do with each of those pages. And so here we'll initialize our inner loop. And what we want is for every item in our organic listings, now we want 5 if-else statements where if we find our HTML tag, then we want to append it to one of our empty lists. If we don't have an object there, then we want to just write not available or no name, no address. That's going to be the strategy for our inner loop. Again, targeting each of the HTML tags that we outlined and appending it to an empty list or noting as not available. And so, if item has, this is where we need our h2 tag, give it with a class name of n, we need to append it to the name list above. Name.append. And what we're appending is exactly what we find here. Otherwise, sorry? Hold on. Here we go. Oh, up here, sorry. If I find, oh, after the end, yes, there we go. Thank you, and here too. Right here, there we go. Oh, and up top, yep. Thank you, appreciate that. Okay. And so if we don't have that, then we just want to append no name. All right, so that's the first instance of us targeting our tag, appending it to an empty list, or inserting, some version of not available. And so now we have 4 more tags that we want to target. Let's do that same thing. I'll read them off. We'll append it to one of the empty lists that we created above. And then once that's done, we'll stitch together our data frame. Just gonna copy this. Here? Right here? Oh, yes, I am missing one here. Thank you. So for the second if statement, we're going to target our phone number. And so here I need a div that is, here's the tag, phone, primary. No, I believe it's phone singular, but let's just check. Oh, you're right. Phones, plural, phone primary. Good catch, thank you. Here it is. Phones. And we'll do no phone. Oh, got an extra tick mark. Okay. That's a great question. He asks, why is it important to have a placeholder? The way that I've structured this, having 5 separate lists that eventually get stuck together and turn into a data frame, it's important that our listings align. And so we don't have a placeholder. If there's nothing there, that spot will basically be skipped. And so it will throw off the order of our individual attributes in our data. And so to keep them all aligned, I'm inserting that. And so this is an example where there's probably a better, more efficient way to scrape our data so we don't have to insert something blank. I've explored exporting it, the entire pieces of data as tuples, just kind of working through something. But that's why. Does that answer your question? Cool. All right, so we got our phones. Let's now do this for our address, locality, and categories. So if I find a div whose class name is locality, then append that locality. Oh, we got to change our list names, sorry. Locality. For the phones, we don't want to append to the name list, we want to append to the phone list. There we go. So here we're targeting our locality div, If we find it, append it to the locality list. If we don't find it, append no locality to that list. And then one above, we want to append the phone number to the phone list, not the name list as I originally had it. Lastly, if we find a div categories class name, append that to the categories list. All right. Locality, address, phone, locality, address, phone. No, we're missing. We have name, phone. I'm sorry, I skipped the address. Here we go. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if statements, each corresponding to an empty list that we initialized up above. Street address, we have n, phone, street address, locality, and categories. Yes. Categories, no locality, no address. There we go. No address. All right, I'm gonna try running this. Let's see. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, we can. Yes. Right here. Oh. Sorry? That's true. Here, we'll do this. Rec. Oh, that would have been good, yeah. Yeah, rec. All right, let's try that. 4. Oops. Thank you all for the help troubleshooting. Really appreciate the. I would be just frozen right now if I didn't have the help, so I really appreciate it. While my code reads, any questions? Does anyone need any help filling something? Any points of clarification? Yes. Oh, how did I know it ended at 102? I just started typing in numbers, and I eventually anything past 101 just kept showing the same results. Yeah. Great question. How did I know that we needed a range that got us 101 pages? I checked to see where it ended. what we're going to be doing after is basically zipping together our individual lists and then turning them into a data frame. And then you can export that out, feed it to other systems or things you're doing, analyze it, geocode it, and perhaps build a map. That's something we're considering doing next as part of our own internal analysis. So some things that you could do with the data once it's done reading. All right, so we have 3,032 entries in our names list. Hey, all right, so quick mini spot validation. I got some results. We'll let you all see. Thumbs up if you're starting to get results. Okay. Is everyone still reading or just processing the for loop? Okay, take a minute. Perhaps use this last few minutes as this reads to think about if there's any data sources in your world where they live within some sort of HTML structure, anything you could apply BeautifulSoup and request to in your own worlds. I'll leave the code open for a minute. Just also, while things load, know that at the Office of Finance, really the city of Los Angeles as a whole, our information technology agency recently rolled out a citywide data science platform that runs on Jupyter Hub. And so we've been testing internally as a city ways to scale our general data science and data practices using this. All right, now let's zip together and zip our lists that we've now appended data to and package them up into one list that we can insert that as the columns in our data frame. So let's try this out. Let me take a quick peek. And so now we're gonna append, or we're gonna package up our list so we can turn them into a data frame. So let's call this zip lists, and we want a list of the zipped up list that we have above, which are name, phone, address, locality, categories. All right, so now we have our zipped up lists. Now let's create our data frame. Data frame. We're gonna use our zip lists list, and now for our columns, we want to name them. Thumbs up if your code's done processing and if you're able to package up your list. Does anyone need any help? Are there still, is anyone stuck on anything? Do we need any help with anything or any questions? So again, I hope you find ways to optimize this code or optimize this strategy. Broad strokes, main takeaways: use BeautifulSoup to target HTML tags, and then you have a number of approaches as to how you can go about bringing those objects in to a more manageable environment, something that you can conduct analysis, blend into your data, whatever it might be. For folks that are ready, let me show you all the link where you can go get the Yelp sample notebook we'll be using so you can make a copy of it. So if you're done with the Yellow Pages piece, head over to this website right here, bit.ly. Yeah, if you all just reopen bit.ly/YP_scrape, you all will be pointed to the notebook that I just worked on. So if you want to get this code, bit.ly/YP_scrape. Can I get a thumbs up if we're ready to talk about Yelp? Okay. If you didn't fully wrap up the Yellow Pages scraper, don't worry. Just again, write this website down, this link, and then you can go back and access it and tear it apart and optimize it and do whatever you want to do with it. For Yelp, we have about 20 minutes, and ideally leave room for some Q&A. So we'll move through this rather quickly. Here's the link you can use to get to the Yelp notebook that I've set up for us. So if you go to Yelp/API or bit.ly/Yelp_API. It'll take you to another Google Colab notebook. But let's talk through some of what the code will eventually be. Yelp makes available its Fusion API. We'll explore that documentation in a second. Similar to, as we always do, we're gonna import the libraries we'll be using. For this, we only need requests. And then we'll wanna stitch this together into a data frame using pandas. We're going to need the URL that basically calls Yelp's API. And so you have that in your notebook. Then everyone needs their own key. That's why we needed you all to have a developer account. So you'll need your own key. And then you need to set up your header object like this. Your notebook will already have that header object. And then the way Yelp's API works is it gives you results in batches of up to 50. And so basically in your calls, you have to set up an offset parameter that forces Yelp to give you the next batch of 50. And so we'll do some work with that in a second. And then we're gonna structure our for loop in similar fashion as to the yellow pages. We're going to loop through a set of URL parameters, specifically the offset, so we can get multiple batches. And then the way I originally had this, we were able then to iterate through each JSON object, but that stopped working a few days ago. So we're gonna build out that nested for loop, but I've been having some issues. Maybe we can troubleshoot together and fix it. But that's a little bit of what we're gonna do. All right, we're gonna create a for loop that iterates through offsets, and then we'll try to nest it into a larger, or nest it with a smaller for loop to actually chunk out the data we want. So let's head over to our yellow pages practice notebook. Right here, if you open up the Yelp documentation, you're gonna see the parameters, bless you, that Yelp makes available for us to target our listings. So we'll be using this get request up here. We're gonna be using, we'll use a term that's something like coffee, pizza please, contractor. We need a location. And so the location can be a specific address, or you can also drop in latitude and longitude instead of specific locations. And then we can also set things like a radius. So if you want to search within, a 400 meter, this is set in meters, a 400 meter section from a specific point, you can also do that. Much more, many other parameters to work off of here. We also have the offset, which I mentioned. And you can use things like price and categories to fine-tune your search. And then these are all of the individual objects that will be returned in the JSON. So all that's available, of course, in the documentation. If you have your notebook open, go ahead and make a copy just like last time. And then here we'll start importing our libraries again. So we'll import requests as R, and we'll import pandas. In the next section, you'll need to go to your Yelp developer account and get your key. This is my practice key. Just copy that from your Yelp developer account. You just need to throw it into a key object. If this wasn't my practice account, I would be more protective over that key, of course. And now let's just do an initial call to just get the first set of listings. And let's just see what that looks like. All right. Keys, we'll need to set up our parameters and then set up our response call. Okay, let's do that. So we need our URL params first. So go ahead and initialize URL params. We're gonna open this up. And I'm sorry, I gotta cheat a little bit. We're gonna do location limit. Let me just copy all this here. So for the sake of time, we've gone ahead and initialized URL parameters, including a location, a limit, so it's gonna give me the first 50, or it's gonna give me up to 50. The default is 20. I'm gonna use a term like coffee. A radius of 2,400 meters, which is roughly 1.5 miles. This is City Hall's address, by the way. So I'm just searching for up to 50 coffee shops within 1.5 miles radius of City Hall. And I'm gonna have it start at the very first listing. So So go ahead and get your URL parameter set up. And then we're going to structure a response, an object called response. That uses requests to get, and then we have our credentials up above using the URL that was provided to you all, the headers as we have them, and then the URL parameters as you've chosen to lay out above. And now let's print this and see what we get. I'm curious, has anyone here worked with the Yelp's API before? Just show of hands. 1, 2. Okay, very cool. Just a handful. Great. It's cool to see. What about scraping with BeautifulSoup? Show of hands if you had used it a good before. Nice. Okay. All right, so if you go ahead and run the call for your first 50 listings, you'll see that you get a JSON object that has information for the individual businesses. And now we'd want to iterate over that object and append the individual results in our JSON to newly created lists. However, I know we have about 13 minutes left. I just want to take a quick pause. We've been able to generate one call. Again, I learned just 2 days ago that for some reason I haven't been able to figure out what's going on so that I can't iterate over the actual business object itself. But I want to take a quick pause. Any initial questions, clarifying questions, anything about what we've covered so far that you would like further clarity on in these last few minutes that we have together? Yeah. For the parameters? It's how I learned it. So no particular reason. Do you have any thoughts on what could have been maybe a more efficient use here? Okay. Yeah. Again, a lot of space for optimization here. And so that was just kind of the road I went down when I was first learning how to use Yelp's API. I have not. No, that's... Yeah. I have it as a I don't have it published up to GitHub. Okay, yeah, please do. I will actually after this I'll drop it into into this URL here. So afterwards, just go get it here. Once I get back to the office, I'll just dump in my code, and then you all can have it there. Please do. Please follow, and I'll follow back. All right, and so let's see here. Well, let's see if this runs. So your next step would be creating a for loop that basically loops through each business in our response result. We're gonna run this and see if it works. But again, I've been having issues, and so have not been able to make it work for us. I'm going to initialize an empty business list. And now we're going to run this for loop. I know we're kind of tight on time, so I just pasted in the responses. So basically, we have a for loop that is going to iterate over every business identified in our JSON response, and it's going to grab the name, address, phone, its URL, and append it to this empty business list that I've created. So let's try running this. I've been getting an error result. Maybe together we can figure out. Oh, no, this worked. Oh, okay. So that got us a list of the first 50 businesses. The issue I've been having is getting it to iterate through multiple offsets. So we successfully run a first for loop. Now let's try the nested for loop. All right, go ahead and create a list just using the first 3 digits for offset. So create an offset list that holds 0, 51, 101, and 151. And let's just try to loop through a handful of offset steps and see if that works. Maybe that was my mistake. So in our for loop, we're going to have URL parameters that for I in offset, let's see, list. We'll just have, let's create a for loop that iterates over those steps in the offset list. And then that same loop that we ran a little while ago, we're going to run as our inner loop. All right, let's see. We have an outer loop that loops through our offset list, inserting it into the offset step in our URL parameters. And the response that we get from that, we are going to iterate over and append the results to a new empty list that I've created. So I'm going to try to run this, and then let's see if we get. Wow. Thank you. What was your name? Catherine. Clutch, my savior. Thank you. I spent a bunch of hours between Sunday and today like trying to figure it out, and I think that was it. Okay, so using a short offset list, we're able to here have two nested for loops, one iterating over the different offset lists, and then the other one iterating over the individual businesses within our JSON response, ultimately appending them to an empty list that we see here. I'm going to stop there. I really appreciate your all's help in this process. I appreciate you all coming here and learning about web scraping. I know many of you all had worked with some of these technologies in the past. I hope there was some value in our time together. Any last questions or words from you all? All right, well, I hope you have a great rest of the conference, and thanks again.